Hello, this lesson is 1.4 about lines, and it's very similar to the 1.3 lesson. So if you've done well on that, you're probably just about ready to get going on this one. Some of our key terms here, we've got linear equations. We've already talked about slope-intercept form last time. That's y equals mx plus b. Intercept form we've talked about. That's ax plus by equals c. So today we're adding this equation for point slope form. And you are supposed to recognize it and know it, but the reality is we're not going to use it. So not really. They might ask you a question about it to put something in point slope form, but we can get where we need to by using slope intercept form again and again and again. Parallel lines have the same slope, and perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So just a comment about what that means then. If I had two parallel lines, the first slope is the same as the second slope. But if I have perpendicular lines, to get to that second slope, you have to change the sign and you're going to flip it over. And that's the same thing with whichever one you're going to get. So really for negative reciprocal, what that means is change the sign as far as whether or not it's positive or negative and flip it over. And we'll apply this later in this lesson, but that's probably a slide then that you'd want to take a screenshot of, or maybe a snapshot with your phone. It's got a lot of information. I've already given you this too on a previous one. Y equals a number is horizontal and x equals a number is vertical. And we talked about that if you have a horizontal line, the slope of a horizontal line is 0, whereas the slope of the vertical line does not exist. And so we just put D and E. All right, so let's look at what kinds of problems do we need to do and how do we need to apply this information. So find the slope and the y-intercept from the graph. Then write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. Well, first of all, then, the slope. What you need to do for the slope is identify two clear places where you can say, I definitely recognize this point. So like this one goes through the point 0, 0. I can see that for sure. Backing up, and it wouldn't matter which direction you go, you would not want to use this one because it doesn't cross at a grid mark. But it looks like this one does. Okay, so we identify. In order to do that on your homework, don't forget to pop it out and make it as big as possible so you can really see what's going on there. So then you can move vertically and then horizontally if you want to, rather than apply the formula. So I can go down and then I can go over. And what that tells me is I went, writing it over here, I went down 2, so that's a negative 2. And then I went to the right 1. So that slope is negative 2 over 1, which is negative 2. Then the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So if you look at your y-axis and you just visually go down, it crossed it right here at 0. So the y-intercept was 0 as far as that b value goes. So the little b for the y-intercept is 0. The slope was negative 2. Now, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So what we're going to do is fill in the blanks for y and b. So it's y equals negative 2x, and then plus 0 is correct, but it's not simplified. So we're going to get rid of that plus 0 and just say y equals 2x. And that would be slope-intercept form. Now here's another one. This one's not copied from the homework, but it is a little bit easier to see those points on there. So again, if I want to travel vertically, you always want to do the rise before you do run. That one is a difference then. I have gone down 6. It only looks like 3 grid points, but they were counting by 2s. And then you do your horizontal movement. And so you can see there that I have backed up. So that's also in the negative direction. And I've gone -3 in that direction because they counted by something different. So my slope would be -6 over -3, which is +2. Then as far as the intercept, that's also right here. That's where it crosses the y-axis. So my little b, my y-intercept, is 6. So when I'm going to write my answer, y equals mx plus b, I have y equals 2x plus 6. And that would be the answer. All right, so what else is in store for us? Well, here, rather than us seeing a graph, they're giving us 2 specific points. So we have to write slope-intercept equation for the point. And so what is, I'm just going to say this again and again, I'm trying to get it in your brain. Y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept. Now, this point has a 7 and a -4. It happens to be an x and a y value, as all points are, but this one is a special x and y value, and they don't always give us the special x, y value, but because we have a 0 here, I know that that value is b. So they've actually given me the b. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the y, the x, and the b and fill them in with these 3 numbers right here. So then I can say, okay, the y they gave me equals m, the parentheses around that x in general. Here it wouldn't matter, but that's pretty important a lot of times, so it's best to just get in the habit. And then b, well, plus -7 is the same thing as -7. All right, so if I add 7 to both sides of the equation, what I'm wanting to do is solve this for the slope. So -4 plus 7 is 3. So 3 is equal to 7 times m. I took off my parentheses when I put it in front. If I divide both sides of this, I will get the slope is equal to 3 over 7. Just dividing both sides by 7. So now, since I know the slope, I'm going to use this slope with this b, and I'm ready to write my answer. Y equals 3/7 x minus 7. And that is my equation. Sorry about drawing that line through that. I need to quit drawing boxes around things. Habit. So what happens if they don't give you that b? How do you do it from just 2 points without the b? So that's what we're going to look at next. And let's switch up color just so it'll be a different example. What you want to do first of all is find the slope. I had to find the slope on this one. It's just that I did it from the slope-intercept equation. But now I'm going to go y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 minus 2, -2 minus 2 is -4, and then that reduces to -1/2. So now I have the slope. Well, now what I need to do is use this slope with either of the original points. It will not matter, except for I choose the one anytime I can, even though I do math quite a bit. I'm going to choose the one where I can avoid negatives or fractions, because we make fewer mistakes if we're not dealing with those. So then I go into my y equals mx plus b, but I am going to fill in the things I know now, because with that point up there, I have an x and a y, and I have the m. So I have the y, the m, and the x, and then that's going to let me solve for b. So y, let me just kind of bring it up over here. I have 3 equals, so that's y equals m, that's -1/2, times the x value. Oh, it didn't recognize a 2, did it? That's supposed to be a 2. plus b. Well, -1/2 times 2 is -1. So then I can solve that and find that b is 4. So now again, I know that b is 4. So that's here. And I know my slope was -1/2. I'm ready to write my answer. So my answer, my final answer for this one is y equals -1/2 x plus 4. Okay, and that would be the answer for the second one. So you've got to find your slope and find b, but they don't always give them to you directly. Now write equations of horizontal and vertical lines that pass through this point. Well, let me just refresh that again. Right down here at the bottom right of the slide, a horizontal line is just the y value of the number, and the vertical line is the x value. So when I'm going to have the horizontal line is the y value, and the vertical line is the x value. So then I look at this point, and my horizontal line is y equals, now what is the y value of that number? -7. That one is my horizontal. My vertical is the x equals, and in that particular point, it has to match up with that one because it has to go through that point. It's 3/11. Okay, so those are the equations of the lines. They're almost so easy that sometimes we forget them, but you just have to go through that particular value. So now, write a slope-intercept form of the equation of the line with slope of 3 and passing through the point. So you always just have to ask yourself, well, what information did they give me? If they gave you the slope, they gave you the m value. And if they gave you a point, they gave you an x and a y. Now we're supposed to do slope-intercept. That's y equals mx plus b. And so I can fill in a y, an m, and an x. And so I'm going to use that to solve for b. So I have my y value given equals m times the x value given plus b. So if we subtract 12 from both sides, I get -11 equals b. So now I know what b is. I already knew my slope, so now I'm ready to write my answer. Y equals 3x plus a -11 is the same as -11. And that's the answer. All right, so let's look at our next one here. Slope-intercept form of the equation of the line with the slope of 0. That's the m of 0 and passes through the point. So again, I have an x and a y. Now, I can do this one the exact same way. So I have y equals mx plus b. But because that's 0, it's just very different. And I have b is equal to -3. So if I'm going to write y equals mx plus b, it's y equals 0x minus 3. But again, to simplify it, we just get y equals -3. And I actually hope that you're thinking, why didn't she just write that in the first place? Because again, if you'll remember from our earlier slide, if I need to write a horizontal equation, it's just y equals and then the number. Y equals the number. So when we go back and look at this one, the moment it has a slope of 0, a slope of 0 does indicate that this thing is horizontal. Since it has a slope of 0 and it's horizontal, all I needed to do is write y equals the number. So you can work it out traditionally if you don't realize that, but it's certainly going to be faster if you are catching on to the little things along the way. All right, then we need to learn to plug in some values to find different things, because we have to find our function. So what happens when they give you an f value, like f of 3? Generally, then, what we need to keep in mind is that f of x equals y. So if you look at that, this 3 that's in the parentheses is an x value, and the negative 3 out here is a y value. I should not have put that negative there, but that's a y value. So I actually have a point 3, negative 3. Similarly, on this next one, negative 3 is an x value, and 7 is a y value. So I have another point, negative 3, 7. Now, if f of x is y, and this wouldn't always be true, but in this section of the algebra class, we're dealing with linear equations. So we have y equals mx plus b. Then I can go ahead and work with it as a y, and then just label it as f of x after I get done. So I can, just like I've been doing, find the slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Minus a negative does make it positive, so that becomes 10 over negative 6. Now that reduces 5. I'll stick that negative in front, and then 3. So negative 5/3 is my m value. Now I can use, remember, this is kind of like one I did before. I'm going to just pick one of my points. So since it doesn't really matter, I'm going to pick this very first point. So I'm going to use this xy value with that slope and work on writing my equation. So the y value is equal to m times x plus b. Those 3's very handily cancel out. So negative 3 is equal to negative 5 plus b. If I add 5 to both sides of that equation, I'll get b is 2. Now that I know b is 2, I'm going to use that result with my slope to finish writing in mx plus b. So I know that I have, for the mx plus b, I have negative 5/3 x plus 2. Didn't really look like an x, did it? And that is equal to my y value, but don't forget, y is f of x. So maybe I can circle that of sorts. All right, so that's the very first part it asked me to do, is find f of x. I've done that. Then I'm supposed to find f of 2. That means I want to plug a 2 into x. And I get negative 5 over 3 times 2 plus 2. Now, you can do this on a calculator, of course, but multiplying fractions, I'm just going to put that 2 over 1, and then top to the top. Multiplying fractions, that's no problem. Top to the top and the bottom to the bottom. So that is negative 10 over 3. And since I do have a fraction here, I'm going to rewrite the 2 with a common denominator of 3. And 2 is the same as 6 over 3. So then I can combine going across the top, and I get negative 4/3. So f of 2 is negative 4/3. And that would be this last answer they asked me to get. So certainly this must be about as long as our problems get, and it is. But we're doing the same thing over and over. We're just kind of adding steps along the way. So now we talk about parallel, perpendicular, and neither. So just as an extra note here, this is the same thing I wrote on that first line, but when we do parallel, we're going to have the same slope. They're going to be equal. And when we do perpendicular, it's going to be a negative reciprocal. That's the math term for it. But what that means is that if you have a slope, the other one, you have to change the sign and flip it over. And this is kind of the shortest way to write that down. And then if neither one of those happens, that's when we're dealing with neither. So to determine whether or not we have parallel, perpendicular, or neither, you have to find the slope. Okay? So here it is given for that one because it's mx plus b. So my slope is 5. But for this one, this is not in either one of our forms. So I'm going to get y by itself by dividing by 5. And so here it cancels, and then this second equation becomes y. Well, I don't have room to write it there. I don't know why I'm trying. The second equation becomes y equals 1/5 x minus, and then 85 divided by 5. It'll go in there 17 times. Okay, so here is your second slope. And they are not the same, so it's not parallel. They're also not perpendicular. Now, it would be if this one were negative 1/5, but it's not negative. So those are both positive numbers, so that automatically means it can't be perpendicular. So this very first set is neither. Right, just changing up colors just so our lines don't all blur together when we're doing the work. This one, y equals a number. Now you could go back and glance at that if you need to, but y equals a number is horizontal and the slope is 0. X equals a number is vertical. So this one is, and this one is, does not exist. It's really hard for me to write on the screen. But this one is kind of an exception because what we know is that one of these is horizontal and the other one is vertical, and horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. Okay, so that is definitely not fitting the flip, the reciprocal sort of a thing. I can't hardly write on the screen for anything, but because it's horizontal and vertical, they are perpendicular. All right, let's look at our last one here. We have a slope very nicely identified in this first equation is -2. On the next one, it's not identified, but if we remember that shortcut, now you could rearrange it, bringing that over, but the slope of the second one is going to be -2 over 1, which is -2. So look at that. The slopes for those are exactly the same, so these are parallel. Okay, so when the slopes are the same, it's parallel. Generally, it would be like perpendicular. You've got to turn it over and change the sign. So looking at our one that's in red, it did flip it. We have the reciprocal, but it doesn't change the sign. On the other hand, even though this one doesn't seem to do that in green, we do know that horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. Okay, write the slope-intercept forms of the equations that pass through this point, parallel to this line, and then write a second equation that passes through the point but is perpendicular to the line. So I didn't read all the numbers, but there we go. So what is it that we have? We know we have an x and a y. And the line they gave me is 3x plus 4y equals 7. The reason that's important is because I can't do perpendicular or parallel unless I know what the slope of this line is. So the slope is, and I am using that approach of A, B, C. When you have it lined up like that, the slope is the opposite of A over B. because we would get that from taking that 3x to the other side, so we get the -3, and then we divide it by 4. So that's my slope. Now, since it said parallel, I need to use the same slope. So for the parallel, my information that I have is 3, -2, and a slope of -3/4. By contrast, when I'm going to do the perpendicular one, and I hope you will be okay, I'm going to abbreviate that one with just the beginning. The perpendicular, I still have the point to use 3, -2. But for the slope of this one, I need to use the negative reciprocal, which means change the sign. This was -3/4, I'll have to make it positive, and flip it over. So I have a different slope to use over here. Now I'm going to use the same approach on both of these problems. I have an x and a y and a b, so I'm going to use from y equals mx plus b, which is that slope-intercept form, and I'm going to fill in the y, the x, and I said b, but I have the m, the y, the m, and the x, and I'll solve for b, and then we'll go back and do it. So here, y equals m x plus b. So now I'm solving that for b. Now I need to add 9/4, but if I'm going to add 9/4, I need to have fourths over here unless I'm using a calculator. So this one is -8/4 plus 9/4 is -1/4. Once I know b, I'm ready to write my answer because I've already got my m, and now I have b. So my answer for this one is y equals m -3/4 x, and then plus b, which was -1/4. And that's the answer for that one. Same approach over here at perpendicular. The only difference was that I had to use a slope that was the negative reciprocal. I had to change the sign and flip it over. So again, use correctly. M and then times x plus b. Well, now here the 3's handily cancel out. Yay, love that when it happens. So -2 equals 4 plus b. Subtract 4 from both sides, and we get b is -6. So now, again, I'm ready to use b and my slope to write my answer for this one. So my answer on this one is y equals 4/3 x minus 6. All right, same process. It's just that you have to identify the slopes. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocals, which means change the sign and flip it over. All right, one more here. What is the equation of the vertical line? I just had to give this one to you so that you can see. After you have a horrible problem, sometimes the next one is nice and easy. Vertical line, okay? Vertical lines, going back to that slide just so you can see it down here in the bottom right, a vertical line is x equals the number, okay? X equals the number. So since it wants vertical, x equals. So my vertical line down here is going to be x equals the only x value I have, 5. The horizontal line is going to be y equals the number. So my horizontal line, y equals -1. And one more time, what are the slopes to those lines? Vertical lines, the slope does not exist. Undefined, a lot of things say. No slope. Horizontal lines, the slope is 0. All right? So that should finish up this lesson, and don't forget, you can get in touch with me with Use the Instructor at the bottom of most of your questions under that More Help option.